I'll go ahead and call us to order, and I'll ask Chairman Carmichael if he will give our invitation.
Let us all just be thankful together. Heavenly Father, we are so blessed to live in the United States of America and to live in a county with such warm and passionate people as Paulding County. Just give you thanks this morning for all your little blessings. We pray for your guidance in our discussions and our decisions and the things that we do. We just give you the honor and the glory. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen. Most of our folks are usual, but I'm glad to see Calvin Thompson, our past chair here. Glad to see you today. Calvin, the first item of business is the approval of minutes from the February 20, 2019 meeting. You received a copy of those. Anybody note any errors or omissions? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make the motion.
Have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries with one abstention by Mr. Tidwell. Next item is the approval of the financial statements. You've received those. Anybody have any questions on the financial statements? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Airport Director's Report.
Okay, it's been a busy month. I believe everybody by now knows that the governor did sign the amended budget. There is $35 million in that amended budget and FY19 funds for the Technical College System of Georgia to build the 6th AMP school in Georgia at our airport. This is huge news for us. While we're not responsible for the school, not responsible for building the school, it will be on property that will become adjacent to us. It's currently airport property. So there's a lot of work for us to do to support that, to work with Chattahoochee Tech to see that come a reality. And we're just very excited that this is a huge thing for Paulding County, a huge financial opportunity for us to have another school in the county, of course, but just the fact that we are going to be moving into the center of instructional training for A&P mechanics at a time when A&P mechanics are at such a critical need and getting more so. All you have to do is read the paper about the MAX 8. I mean, you know, that's a situation where mechanics are all over that situation, and we'll be very fortunate to be able to participate in that. We're happy to do that. Flying Tigers, our new flight school, has announced that they're going to be offering $99 introductory flights. So I just want to make sure the public is aware of that. Great opportunity for somebody to come out and explore flight for under $100. And we're excited to have them here and looking forward to good things from them. So for the month, we had a music video shoot at the airport. That was something that came up very suddenly, called what, on a Thursday or Friday?
So Thursday.
A Thursday, and by Sunday they were there filming out in front of the terminal building, the SUNY Purdue terminal building there. So that was exciting for us to be able to participate in that. We hosted the Leadership Paulding, is it 27 or 29? 29, which is a chamber orchestrated event, but it gave us a chance to brief the current class of Paulding County business leaders. I was there, Chairman Carmichael was there, 2 of the other commissioners were there. We had an opportunity to talk about economic development. I got to brief economic development from an airport perspective. I had a lot of really good questions. I think it was a good event. We had the Customs and Border Patrol in for an entire week. They brought 2 helicopters and they were doing recruiting. So Custom and Border Patrol, these are the folks that primarily on the southern border. They've got helicopter pilots who patrol that border for us, and they are recruiting in the southeast, and it looks like we're going to become their preferred location for doing their southeast area recruiting. They were very pleased with the support that we were able to give them, the fact that we had rooms available for them to do interviews in. Their candidates would come in, they would go out for a flight evaluation, they would fly typically for an hour or two, and then they'd come back and buy lots of gas. And that's always a good thing for the airport. So very happy to be able to participate in that, and they will be back, they say, periodically for additional southeastern area recruiting. Last weekend, we hosted the federal DOT. They sent in 3 auditors, and what they are auditing is the ADSB mandate. Carrie's very familiar with that. Dave, I'm sure, is. But this is a new change to the electronic equipment, the transponders in particular, that go on all aircraft, not just general aviation, but it affects the military, the civil fleet, the commercial fleet. And they're going around doing audits and interviews with local pilots to try to gather input for a report that they're doing for Congress. And through John Betzel, who's our AOPA volunteer that I think all of y'all are familiar with, John arranged for them to make a visit to our airport. We teamed up with our local EAA chapter, and we had a dozen local pilots there for them to interview and interact with. And so we got to have direct input into that process. So that was exciting both for us and for aviation in general. We hosted the Flight 242 Memorial Fundraiser. We were represented by myself, Dave Carmichael, Carrie Tidmore. Dave and I were escorted by our lovely wives, but Carrie, like any good professional pilot, he came in with 3 beautiful women. So thank you for bringing your daughters. We enjoyed having dinner with them that night. They raised a lot of money, had over 100 people show up. This was for raising funds for the memorial in New Hope to commemorate the crash. It's the deadliest crash in aviation history in Georgia, and it happened in 1977. Some of y'all are familiar with that story. And this group is raising money for a memorial toward the families and people who were involved in the rescues and what happened. So we were very happy to be a part of that. We hosted the Republican Convention, the Paulding County Republican Convention. Had about 100 delegates and guests who came to conduct party business there, and we were happy to be able to host that. We had the High School Cosmetology Expo Career Day this month. That was a very successful event. In the near term coming up, we've got Keep Paulding Beautiful is going to have their next event at the airport on April 6th. And the reason we picked that date, as you know, we're preparing the next weekend for the 5K fun run. That'll be Saturday, April 13th. Our EAA chapter will meet again on April 20th. And AOPA is teaming up with us to bring a Rusty Pilot seminar on May 11th. So we need pilots in our community that may not have flown for a while. Bring your logbook. You can log 3 hours of ground instruction towards a biannual flight review. And Flying Tigers is partnering up with us to give biannual flight reviews in their airplanes after that. You'll have to pay for that, of course, but the Rusty Pilot training will be free. So that's events. 3 of our motions today center around grants, and I thought it'd be a good time for me to real briefly review the grant process, because I think there's confusion about why do we vote so many times on what seems like the same thing, and it turns out there's a good reason for it. So let me just make sure everyone is clear on how our grant process works. So under the terms of the intergovernmental agreement that we have with the county administers and manages the grants, because all of the grant money goes to the county, not to us. And then by contract, they handle those funds and give them to us, and we manage the actual construction programs that are funded by these various grants. Georgia is a block grant state. That means that the Georgia DOT Aviation Department, which is headed up by Mr. Steve Bryan, they manage all of the FAA grant money, and they manage the Georgia Aviation Program. And so we interact primarily with Georgia DOT. We do interact a lot with the FAA, but when it comes to grants and construction and those kind of things, our primary interface is through Georgia DOT. And just by way of refresher, if it's federal money, that's reimbursed typically at 90%, so we put in 10%, the federal government puts in 90%. If it's state money, it's a 75-25. If it is a reimbursement for a program that's already been completed, it has to be federal dollars. The state does not participate in reimbursements. That comes strictly from the FAA. And if the state and the FAA team up together on a project, we get 95% reimbursement. So that's the really sweet money that we like to get because our local community has to come up with 5% and the state and federal government pay 95% for that. At the beginning of the year, each year, the fiscal year, so that's 1 July, Georgia DOT has done their planning based on all of the 5-year updates that they receive from all airports across the state. And they prioritize, rack and stack, and they determine what their plan is for how they're going to spend the federal and state grant money for that fiscal year. Then they send to the county chairman, in our case, what's called a technical assistance letter, a TA letter, that he then has to respond to and either say, yes, we appreciate the money and we're willing to participate, or no, we are not. And so you'll remember that usually in July or August, we have a vote and the Board of Commissioners have a vote. And what we're voting on essentially is the approval of that technical assistance letter. That is not a grant, it's a letter of intent. And based on that positive vote from both of our boards, the chairman then sends a letter to the head of Georgia DOT and says, we accept the offer of this grant money, we will participate at the appropriate levels, and then that gets the grant process started. This year, in July, we were given a technical assistance letter for $150,000 for pavement remarking, and if there's any left over, it would go toward additional reimbursements of our wetlands. Doesn't look like there's going to be any left over, but if there is, that's where the additional funds up to $150,000 would go. Our airport is now 10 years old. Our pavement markings are now aging. The last 2 consecutive airport inspections have identified that as a high priority safety concern, which helps get these projects. We like to have findings in our reports, because if we had no findings, we'd probably get no money. So these findings help us prioritize the projects that we will then focus on for the next year or 2 or 3. So we have 2 consecutive findings in our inspections that our markings are fading and mildewing and need to be updated and replaced. And so that's what we requested in our 5-year update as one of our top priority programs. And they notified us in our technical assistance letter that that's what they intend to do. That starts the process. It is unusual to do both design and construction in one fiscal year. But for a small project like this, the whole project, design, plans, bid, and construction, can be completed in a 12-month cycle for about the $150,000 that is available for this program. Now, Jacob is here, our Holt engineer of record, Holt Engineering, and Jacob is an employee of Holt, and he's the guy that I work most closely with. This makes his life very complicated because he essentially has to run 2 programs in the year. He's got to run a developmental program and a construction program. So y'all may remember, we've already voted on a couple of different work authorizations for Holt Engineering related to this grant. That was to develop the plans and to develop the bid package and the other items that had to be done to support this activity. That's all now been completed. Jacob and I work very closely with Georgia DOT to make sure those are approved and ready to go. And that's been done. We have now gone through a proposal process, and one of the activities on our agenda for today is to accept the apparent low bid on that bidding process. So I forwarded to y'all the winning bid. And hopefully everybody has had a chance to look over that. And this, along with all of the bids that we received 4 bids, and I gave you all the information on that. If you want to see those bids, we've got them, but if we've got an apparent low bid and it is compliant, which we believe it is, then there's no real reason to go any further in the bidding process. We've got what we want, which is a low bidder. So there's that needs to be approved, and then there are 2 additional work authorizations for hold. One is for the administration of the project. FAA and GDOT require us to use our engineer of record to administer all construction and inspect all construction to verify that it's being done to state and federal requirements. They have met the requirements. Yeah, the low bidder met all of the requirements. We use the terminology apparent low bidder until it's all fully vetted and approved by GDOT. And so if there were any issues that would be discovered, then that bid could in theory be thrown out and you'd go to the next bid. So it's just terminology. But it appears to be a fully compliant bid. Okay, so one of the pieces that I'm going to ask you to approve is additional inspections for, what was it, $6,550. And that's because this additional inspections was not a candidate for the grant. So we'll pay for that on local money. So the state has agreed to pay for part of the inspections. We believe that there's some additional inspections at our airfield that we need to do to make sure that all of the markings are where they need to be, all of the requirements are met. And so we'll be paying for that piece of it with local money, and therefore it needs to be split out as a separate work authorization. That's why you have 3. In a month or so, I will present you with another vote, which is to approve the actual grant. So with all of this information, GDOT is now working on, or once we approve these bids or these actions today, GDOT will then begin preparation of the actual grant, which will go to the county. And we will have to approve that, and the county will have to approve that. That's an actual contract, technically, between Paulding County Board of Commissioners, Paulding County government, and GDOT. And so we approve it, they approve it, the county signs off on it, GDOT signs off on it, and then we're authorized to actually complete the project, apply for reimbursements. The money then goes to the county then pays us back for what we have spent on whatever the construction project is. So that is the very complicated, just a summary of the very complicated grant process. And it's important for me to make sure y'all all fully understand how that operates, so you know why there are so many votes on these things. Some people might think, well, if it's a grant, let's vote on it one time and be done, but that's not how it works. So with that, I'll entertain any questions on grants.
Terry, I have a question.
Yes, sir. Now, wait a minute. You should know all about this.
Yeah, I'm not asking about the grant.
Oh, okay.
The 6550, we're covered under that. Sure, it's necessary. Why is it not eligible for any reimbursement?
Because GDOT has determined how much they will pay for. That's not unusual for them to disallow certain pieces of what we locally believe is necessary for the betterment of the airport, the protection of the airport, what have you. It just didn't fit the funding and the funding profile and what they felt was the minimum set of requirements. Let me give you another example. They also did not pay for the plan development. They said you've got a set of plans that were paid for in 2006 for the runway marking. So they disallowed us paying for a new set of plans because typically they will only pay you. We did. We felt we did. And the new plans wound up being different, and they wound up disapproving some of the things that we put on the new plans. We then had to go back and correct because they weren't happy with it. But they would have been wrong on the old set as well.
Okay.
But they typically will not pay for the same work twice. Okay? So because they had paid for a set of plans to be developed 10 years ago, they said, we'll pay for the marking, but we won't pay for the plans. They disallowed that. Fairly typical. So we paid for that out of local funding, and now we're getting an up-to-date set of plans, and some of the inspections are similar in that regard. They have a minimum inspection program that they will pay for. We want somebody there every day because we're going to have the runway closed, okay? This runway, this airport is going to be closed for the duration of time between the time the contractor shows up and the inspector says, yep, you're good to go. And we don't want that period of time to be the maximum amount of time. We want it to be the minimum amount of time. So we want our inspectors there full time so that we can move everything along as quickly as possible. GDOT, on the other hand, is saying, well, you could get by with only having an inspector there every other day. Well, that might lengthen out the amount of time for the construction project. In the meantime, we're closed. So it's kind of a compromise.
There's an opportunity cost that you have to weigh.
That's right. And that's what we've done, and in conjunction with our engineer, and in defense of Holt, let me say that the vast majority of this money goes to a subcontractor, not to them. So it's not a big pot of money to pay, and it's money that is going to a third-party inspection vendor. Here.
Terry, are we going to be able to have any kind of influence once we get the worker, the inspection part done and the engineering with the subcontractor on time of day?
Oh,
How
absolutely.
we're going to go
Yeah,
about that? So
yeah.
can
We work
minimize-
very closely
Okay.
on all of that. Well, there's all kinds of things like notice to proceed.
Right.
They can't start until we and GDOT have agreed on the notice to proceed. We'll be involved in the scheduling,
Okay, good.
and we'll do everything in our power to minimize the impact to the airport. But it's got to be done.
So we will have influence on how to do it in phases and such, so we'll have not the entire ramp closed, we'll be able to do it in
That's
different
right.
parts. Some of the operators, especially the guys when they're based there, will be impacted.
Yeah, there will be impacts, but we'll be working hard to minimize the impacts.
Okay, good. Okay, good. So the 6550, if I understand it correctly, too, Harold, the caveat on that, that's what that basically is paying for is to do something that plans.
No, we've already done that. We did that several months ago.
Okay.
This is paying for additional inspections.
Okay, additional inspections, okay. Okay. And did the new set of plans, did it add any significant marking to the airfield
It
that's
did.
not already there?
It did. So when the original plans were developed, for example, we did not have the double, we have a double taxiway.
Right.
The people who are opposed to the airport claim that there are no double taxiways in Georgia except for Hartsville. Well, that's true, except that it's not. For new airports that have been built since the 1950s, of which there is exactly one, ours, that's built to modern standards, which ours is, we have a double taxiway that exists between our main terminal building and the fuel farm. That's a 225-foot wide piece of tarmac, and there are twin taxi lanes that go down through that. That taxi lane was not paved the day the airport opened. So those two taxi lanes just go up to the entrance of the pavement where the original apron stopped, and there's no marking from there further, nor was it on the plans. So we have corrected that deficiency. They now go all the way to the end of the pavement, which is where they should go, and it's clearly identified as a parallel taxiway, which is what it is.
Okay, good. And is there any additional striping in the T-hangar area, like center line for that area?
No, we're not going to strike the T-hangar area. You typically, I could, but you typically don't. So that's kind of the wild, wild west out there, so. Yeah.
Be good to have a center line though out there, but it's not required.
It's not required. No, and Jacob and I talked about a taxi line, a center line in front of the fuel farm.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is you don't know what the wingspan is of the plane that's coming up to it. And so if you had a center line and you had a wide wingspan airplane and he was going down the center line, you might be liable if his wingtip struck the tank. So you have to take those kind of things into consideration as well.
I agree with that. Okay.
All right. Any other questions at all?
Terry, I think you and I have discussed off to the side, but maybe some other members, y'all completed the fence. There was one area there that you had to go back and shift a little bit, or?
Yep, that's been done. That's completed. We're having our final inspection this afternoon, and I hope at our next meeting to be able to announce that that project is completed. Now, I will point out, I think everybody knows, but I'll remind you again, we deducted 265 feet from the fence in the area where the new T-hangar is going to go. because we don't want to put a fence up that we then have to turn around and tear down. So we are waiting until the T-hanger design is finished. We're very, very close to that now, maybe as close as a week or two away. And we've got some used chain link fencing that came down from the area where the ARF station is. And we're going to pay to have chain link fence put back up. It's going to cost about $4,000 based on the preliminary bids. But I don't know where to put the fence yet because I don't know where the T-hanger and the construction site is going to be until we finish our civil engineering on exactly how wide is the taxiway coming around the side of the building. So when all of that is nailed down and we know where a safe place to put this last 265 linear feet of fence is, then that will go up, and at that point, we are protected 365 degrees around the airport. So today, Bambi's got to walk all the way around the fence and find this one little area to come through. Other than that, we are protected. And probably by the end of the month, we'll have that final area closed out as well. Again, that final 265 feet will be local money. My engineering estimate right now is something on the order of $4,000 for putting that chain link fencing back up. We'll have to buy a new post and some new fittings, but we've got the wire. And at that point, we will be secure. And it's very, very interesting now to watch the wildlife patterns. Randy reported he was on the backside the other day and he saw a big tom turkey walking around looking at the fence. Of course, the turkey can fly over the fence. Fortunately, they're not the brightest animals in the world, and he probably didn't realize he could fly over the fence, and he was just walking around looking at it, thankfully on the other side. So we think this is going to help our wildlife mitigation immensely. The studies from Berry College, we've talked about this before, they all indicate something on the order of 90% efficiency from a fence of this design. So why is it not 100%? It's not 100% because trees fall on fences, people leave gates open. There are occasional instances where animals do still get through fences. That's why you see so many dead deer up and down the interstate as you're driving. They've got fencing as well, not as tall as ours, but they do have fencing. But it's not 100% effective, but 90% is a huge improvement in wildlife mitigation from where we are today.
Good job, Mr. Chairman.
All right, that's all.
All right. We'll move on then to the new businesses. The motion first is the motion to approve Holt Engineering work authorization for construction administration for the airfield pavement marking project in the amount of $14,550. You've heard the necessity of this and the director's report. Is there a motion to approve? I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item is to approve the Hope Engineering work authorization for the additional inspection of the airfield pavement remarking project in the amount of $65.50. There again, you heard that explanation as well. Is there a motion to approve? Have a motion. Is there a second? Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And then finally, the motion to award to Axtels Inc. in the amount of $104,305 for the airfield pavement remarking project. This is the apparent lowest, most qualified bidder. As Terry said, we'll have some other interactions with the county and approving this once it's all hashed out, but they are the apparent low bidder, and you've received copies of those bids. Is there a motion to approve this contract?
So moved.
Have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We do have a need for, is there any other new business before we move to executive session? Anything? Nothing? Anybody got anything? All right, we do have a need for executive session for the purpose of personnel, real estate, and litigation. Is there a motion to go into executive session for that?
Make the motion to move to executive session.
Have a motion, is there a second? Second. Motion and a second, any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We'll return hopefully shortly. All right. I will note that executive session was adjourned with no action taken, and we'll reopen the regular session. Is there any additional business to be brought before the authority at this time? Chair hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Have a motion, is there a second? Motion and second, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries, we're adjourned. Thank you very much.
No.